You may not believe in magic, but somewhere in your life you have probably used it. Maybe you knocked on wood. Maybe you avoided saying something was going too well. Maybe you wore a charm, kept a protective symbol near your door, or felt uncomfortable when someone stared at you for too long. These small habits seem harmless now, but they come from a very old fear. The fear that misfortune is not always random, that envy can wound, that a glance can carry power, that something unseen may be watching from the dark. For thousands of years, people across the world built defenses against that fear. Eyes painted on boats, hands carved into walls, monster faces above doorways, bottles filled with pins, hair, nails, and urine buried beneath floors, marks scratched into wooden beams, spitting rituals, mirrors, masks, serpents, and the severed head of Medusa. This was not usually magic meant to attack. It was magic meant to defend. A shield against curses, spirits, bad luck, and the evil eye. Its name is Apotropaic magic, and the strangest part is this: it never really disappeared. The word apotropaic comes from the idea of turning something away. In simple terms, apotropaic magic means protective magic. Not a curse, not an attack, not an attempt to harm someone else. It is magic used to block, repel, confuse, frighten, trap, or redirect danger. In the ancient world, danger was not only physical. A storm could destroy crops. A sickness could enter a house. A child could die without warning. A cow could stop giving milk. A person could go from fortune to disaster in a single day. Before modern medicine, psychology, weather science, and germ theory, people still needed explanations. And more than explanations, they needed protection. So they created signs, they repeated rituals, they marked thresholds. They carried objects close to the body. They turned fear into symbols. The mystery is not whether these objects had supernatural power. There is no scientific proof that an eye charm stops a curse, or that a bottle under a floor traps a witch. The deeper mystery is why the same idea appears almost everywhere. Different continents, different religions, different centuries, different languages, and yet again and again, people came back to the same basic belief: evil can enter, so something must stand at the door. One of the oldest and most widespread fears connected to apotropaic magic is the evil eye. The evil eye is the belief that a look can cause harm, sometimes intentionally, sometimes without the person even meaning to. The dangerous gaze is often linked to envy. Someone sees your health, your child, your beauty, your success, your home, your animals, your luck. And by wanting it, admiring it too intensely, or resenting it, they damage it. To modern ears, this may sound irrational, but socially it makes a kind of sense. Envy is real. Jealousy is real. Human beings do watch each other. We compare, we judge, we fear being judged. The evil eye turns that social anxiety into a force. A stare becomes a weapon. And if a stare can harm you, then you need something that stares back. That is one reason eye symbols became so powerful. The Nazar, the blue eye charm seen across the Mediterranean, Middle East, and beyond, is one of the most recognizable examples. It does not hide from the gaze, it confronts it. An eye against an eye, a stare against a stare. The Hamsa hand, often shown as an open palm with an eye in the center, works in a similar symbolic way. The hand says stop, the eye says I see you. Together, they become a warning placed between the person and the threat. These symbols belong to many cultures and traditions. They are not decorations first, they are defenses, and they are part of a much older pattern. The body itself becomes a shield. The eye watches, the hand blocks, the mouth spits, the monster scares, the mirror reflects, the doorway is guarded. The house becomes a living boundary between safety and danger. Historians, folklorists, and anthropologists usually treat apotropaic magic as part of human ritual culture. That does not mean the magic is scientifically real. It means the belief was real, the fear was real, the social function was real. Protective magic gave people a way to act when they felt powerless. If disease entered a village, if a child became sick, If animals died, if harvests failed, people looked for causes. Sometimes those causes were natural. Sometimes they were blamed on spirits, witches, demons, envy, or bad luck. Apotropaic magic offered a response. It turned invisible danger into something manageable. You could carve a mark. You could hang an amulet. You could bury a bottle. You could place a symbol over the bed. You could perform a ritual. Even if the danger could not be seen, the protection could be. That visibility mattered. A charm around the neck did more than symbolize safety. It reminded the wearer and everyone around them that the person was protected. In a world filled with uncertainty, that may have brought real psychological comfort, and in some cases, social protection too. A visible charm could warn others not to envy too openly. A protective mark on a building could announce that the home was ritually guarded. A frightening face above a gate could make the entrance feel defended. This is the official, grounded explanation. Apotropaic magic was a cultural technology of protection, a way to manage fear, a way to mark boundaries, a way to survive uncertainty. But the details are where the mystery begins. Because many of these defenses are not gentle. They are strange, dark, sometimes grotesque, and sometimes buried where no one was meant to see them. Apotropaic magic often works through two symbolic mechanisms: distraction and reflection. Distraction means the threatening force is confused, fascinated, or delayed. The evil spirit, demon, witch, or harmful gaze is drawn away from the vulnerable person. It becomes trapped by the symbol, distracted by the pattern, lost in the object. This is why some protective designs use knots, spirals, mazes, repeated circles, or endless lines. The idea is not just beauty, it is entanglement. The evil force sees the mark, follows it, and cannot pass through. Reflection works differently. Reflection sends the harm back. A mirror, a shining surface, an eye symbol, a face that confronts the viewer. The force comes forward, meets itself, and turns away. This may explain why so many protective symbols are placed at thresholds: doors, windows, fireplaces, beds, stables, cradles. These are vulnerable places. A doorway is not just an opening in a wall. Symbolically, it is a border between worlds, outside and inside, public and private, danger and shelter. The same is true of windows. A window lets in light, but in folklore, it could also let in a gaze, a spirit, a curse, a presence. So people marked the edges, they protected the cracks, they guarded the openings. And sometimes, the protector had to look more frightening than the thing it was meant to repel. That is where Medusa enters the story. Today, Medusa is often remembered as a tragic monster from Greek myth, a woman with snakes for hair, a face so terrifying that anyone who looked at her turned to stone. But in ancient art, the head of Medusa, known as the Gorgonion, was also used as a protective image. Her face appeared on shields, armor, buildings, and objects. This is one of the darkest ideas in apotropaic magic. A monster can become a guardian. The terror that destroys can also protect. Medusa's face is not hiding. It is staring directly outward. Wide eyes, open mouth, unnatural hair. A face designed to stop the viewer, to freeze danger before it comes closer. The same logic appears in other frightening masks and grotesque carvings across different cultures. The guardian does not need to be beautiful. It needs to be powerful. It needs to make evil hesitate. The Romans also used protective amulets and symbols. Some were connected to fertility and vitality. Some were worn by children. Some were hung near homes, shops, or crossroads. To modern viewers, certain Roman protective symbols can seem shocking or strange. But in their own context, they were not merely obscene. They were believed to have force, life force, fertility, aggression, humor, embarrassment, all turned into defense. This is important. Apotropaic magic often uses things that break normal social rules. The grotesque, the sexual, the monstrous, the absurd, the shocking. Why? Because evil is not treated like a polite visitor, it is treated like an intruder, and the symbol's job is to stop it before it crosses the line. In ancient Egypt, protective symbolism was deeply woven into religion, death, kingship, and daily life. One of the most famous protective images is the Eye of Horus. It is associated with healing, restoration, protection, and royal power. The eye was worn as an amulet. It appeared in funerary contexts. It was connected to the idea that the body, the soul, and the journey after death needed protection. Again, the eye is central. Not because eyes are passive, but because eyes are active. They watch, they perceive, they expose. In a world where unseen dangers mattered, a sacred eye could become a guardian. Egyptian protective magic also shows how difficult it is to separate religion, medicine, ritual, and magic in ancient societies. To us, those categories feel separate. A doctor is not a priest. A charm is not a prescription. A prayer is not a treatment. But in many ancient cultures, the boundaries were much thinner. Protection could be spiritual and physical at the same time. A symbol could guard the body. A ritual could calm the mind. A deity could watch the dead. A written formula could be treated as an active force. The modern world often asks, did it work? But the ancient question may have been different. What happens if we do nothing? In medieval and early modern Europe, apotropaic protection moved into the walls of ordinary life. People carved protective marks in the homes, churches, barns, and doorways. Today, these are often called apotropaic marks or witch marks. They could appear as circles, intersecting lines, compass-drawn patterns, Marian marks, burn marks, or other repeated symbols. Many were placed near entrances, windows, fireplaces, roof spaces, and other vulnerable points. Once again, the pattern is clear. The boundary is dangerous, so the boundary is marked. One of the most unsettling examples is the witch bottle. A witch bottle was usually a container filled with materials believed to trap, repel, or reverse harmful magic. Common examples include sharp objects like pins or nails, personal material such as hair or urine, and other symbolic ingredients. Some were buried under thresholds, some were placed near hearths, some were hidden inside walls. The logic is dark but direct. If someone had cursed you, the bottle acted like a decoy body. The harmful force would enter it, the pins would pierce it, the curse would be trapped, reversed, or tortured away from the victim. This is defensive magic, not a curse sent outward, at least not in the usual sense. It is a countermeasure, a magical alarm system, a hidden trap beneath the floor. And what makes witch bottles so fascinating is that they were often concealed. They were not meant to impress guests. They were not meant to decorate the home. They were meant to work silently, under the boards, behind the wall, near the fire, at the entrance. The safest house was not always the brightest house. Sometimes it was the house with something buried underneath it. The same instinct appears far beyond Europe, across Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. Communities developed ways to protect homes, bodies, graves, fields, cities, and sacred places from unseen harm. In Vietnam and parts of East and Southeast Asian spiritual traditions, there are concepts that can be compared with protective placement and spiritual suppression, including ideas associated with Trun Im. The exact meaning depends on context, tradition, and local belief. But broadly, it can involve placing objects, symbols, structures, or ritual power in a location to suppress, stabilize, block, or guard against dangerous forces. This is not identical to a European witch mark, and it should not be flattened into one universal system, but the comparison is useful, because both ideas treat space as spiritually active. A building is not just a building. A road is not just a road. A bridge is not just a bridge. A mountain, river, doorway, grave, or city gate may carry invisible pressure. Something may need to be sealed. Something may need to be redirected. Something may need to be held down. This is the global logic of apotropaic thinking. Human beings do not only build walls against weather and enemies. They build symbolic walls against dread. And sometimes those walls are made from eyes, hands, bottles, stones, marks, masks, mirrors, prayers, and names. The problem with apotropaic magic is that it sits in an uncomfortable place. It is easy to dismiss it as superstition, and from a scientific point of view, there is no evidence that a symbol can physically block envy, curses, spirits, or bad luck. But dismissing it completely misses the point. Because these practices survived for a reason. They gave structure to fear. They helped people explain misfortune. They created rituals of control. They made invisible anxiety visible. And they connected communities through shared belief. If everyone believes the evil eye is dangerous, then everyone also knows how to avoid causing it. You do not praise a child too strongly without adding a protective phrase. You do not boast too openly. You do not stare too long. You do not tempt fate. The belief becomes a social rule. It teaches modesty. It controls envy. It warns against arrogance. It protects what is fragile by surrounding it with caution. In this sense, apotropaic magic is not only about spirits, it is about people. The dangerous gaze may be supernatural in folklore, but the fear behind it is deeply human. The fear of being seen, the fear of being envied, the fear that happiness attracts punishment, the fear that success makes you vulnerable. Even in modern life, we still feel this. We hesitate before announcing good news too early. We say, "Don't jinx it." We knock on wood. We wear lucky objects. We avoid speaking too confidently. We laugh after saying something hopeful, as if to soften it. We may not call it magic, but the pattern remains. One alternative way to understand apotropaic magic is as emotional technology. Not technology made of machines, technology made of behavior. A ritual is something you can do when you cannot control the outcome. A charm is something you can hold when the future feels unstable. A mark is something you can place at the edge of fear. This does not make the supernatural claim true, but it does make the practice meaningful. Imagine a parent in the ancient world. A child is sick. There is no hospital, no antibiotics, no modern diagnosis. The parent cannot see bacteria, cannot understand infection, cannot predict whether the child will live. But they can place an amulet near the child. They can say a prayer. They can make a protective mark. They can call on a power greater than themselves. From the outside, that may look like superstition. From the inside, it may feel like the only available form of love. This is why protective magic often surrounds babies, mothers, animals, crops, weddings, homes, and the dead. These are moments of vulnerability: birth, illness, fertility, travel, death, transition. Whenever human life crosses a dangerous threshold, apotropaic symbols appear. They say, "Do not enter." They say, "Pass over this house." They say, "Look somewhere else." They say, "This one is guarded." The evidence trail is not one single document. It is a pattern scattered across objects, buildings, folklore, and ritual. A blue eye charm hanging from a rearview mirror. A Hamsa necklace worn as jewelry. A Medusa head carved into ancient stone. A protective eye painted on a boat. A witch mark scratched beside a fireplace. A bottle sealed beneath a floor. A horseshoe over a doorway. A mirror facing outward. A phrase spoken after a compliment. A spit over the shoulder. A knock on wood. At first, these things seem unrelated. Different cultures, different eras, different religions. But they answer the same fear. What if harm can cross the invisible line? What if luck can be stolen? What if admiration becomes danger? What if the home is not fully sealed? What if the dead are not fully gone? What if the world is more crowded than it looks? The symbols do not all work the same way. Some frighten, some reflect, some trap, some distract, some absorb, some bless, some warn. But they all point toward one ancient belief. The visible world needs protection from the invisible one. That belief is older than modern nations, older than modern science, older than most of the languages spoken today. and it is still with us, hiding in plain sight. Of course, there is a danger in romanticizing these practices. Not every old belief is harmless. Fear of curses and witchcraft has sometimes led to suspicion, persecution, violence, and false accusations. People accused of causing misfortune could become targets. Women, outsiders, healers, widows, rivals, and socially vulnerable people were often at risk. Protective magic may have comforted some people, but belief in harmful magic could also create fear of neighbors. This is why the distinction matters. Apotropaic magic is defensive. It is meant to turn away harm. Offensive magic, or cursing, is meant to send harm toward someone. But in real history, people did not always separate those categories neatly. A ritual meant to protect one household might be seen by another as dangerous. A counter-curse might look like a curse. A protective bottle might imply that someone nearby was a witch. Fear can defend, but fear can also accuse. That is the darker side of this story. The same human instinct that says, protect the child, can also say, blame the stranger. And once a community believes invisible harm is real, it may start searching for invisible enemies. So apotropaic magic should not be treated as proof of hidden supernatural forces. It should be treated as evidence of human fear, creativity, vulnerability, and belief. It tells us what people were afraid of. It tells us what they valued. And it tells us where they thought danger entered the world. Today, apotropaic symbols have become global images. The evil eye appears on bracelets, tattoos, home decor, clothing, keychains, and phone cases. The Hamsa is worn across cultures, sometimes religiously, sometimes spiritually, sometimes purely as fashion. Medusa has been reinterpreted in art, feminism, trauma symbolism, fashion, and modern mythology. Witch bottles and witch marks appear in paranormal documentaries, museum displays, occult TikTok, folklore channels, and dark academia aesthetics. The symbols travel faster now. They move through algorithms. They become jewelry, wallpapers, logos, tattoos, and content. But the emotional core remains familiar. People still want protection, not always from demons, sometimes from bad energy, from jealousy, from toxic people, from misfortune, from the feeling that the world is unstable. Modern culture may use different words: vibes, energy, boundaries, manifestation, luck, negativity. But beneath the language, the old pattern survives. We still mark ourselves. We still mark our homes. We still keep objects that make us feel safer. We still fear that speaking too soon can ruin something. We still say, don't jinx it. And maybe that is why apotropaic magic feels so strangely modern. Because it was never only about ancient spirits. It was about the human need to create a barrier between what we love and what might destroy it. The final theory is not that magic secretly controls the world. The final theory is more human. Apotropaic magic may be one of the oldest psychological maps of fear. It shows us where people believed danger lived: in the eye, at the door, near the bed, inside the wall, beneath the floor, at the edge of the village, in the jealousy of another person, in the darkness beyond the firelight. And because those fears were invisible, people made them visible. They gave fear a shape, a hand, an eye, a monster, a bottle, a mark, a mirror. The power of these objects may not be supernatural, but their meaning is real. They reveal a truth that modern people still understand. Protection is not just physical. It is emotional, social, symbolic, spiritual. A locked door protects the house, but a symbol protects the feeling of the house. And sometimes that feeling matters almost as much. That is why the evil eye still watches from bracelets and doorways, why the Hamsa still opens its palm, why Medusa still stares from stone, metal, and skin, why old witch marks are still found in forgotten buildings, why buried bottles still appear beneath floors, and why a person who claims not to believe in superstition may still knock on wood before fate hears them. Imagine a house hundreds of years ago, night outside, a fire burning low, a family asleep. Near the hearth, hidden in the darkness, there is a mark carved into the wood. Beneath the floor, something has been buried. A bottle, sealed, sharp objects inside. A trace of the body, a private fear trapped in glass. No one speaks of it. No one shows it to visitors, but it is there. Waiting at the edge between safety and the unknown. Centuries pass. The family disappears. The language changes. The fear changes names. But the object remains. And when someone finally finds it, buried under the floorboards, the question is not just what they believed. The question is what they were so afraid might come in. Because Apotropaic magic was never about darkness alone. It was about the fragile circle of light people drew around themselves, and the ancient hope that something, somehow, would keep the evil outside.